the series that we are a part of tonight is Confessions of an Entrepreneur. That sounds kind of racy. Actually, it's the opposite of racy. Having been in an entrepreneur space for a long time, I can tell you. And our speakers tonight, I don't know, maybe they'll get there, maybe not. It's a series of events that take place once a month. There's an awesome lineup this year, including Sam Blackman from recently exited, I guess he's still there, from Elemental, which was recently acquired by Amazon. Jay Holiday from, he recently exited at Viewpoint Construction. Had a fascinating ride. Oh, Heather Hewitt, really? From Tazo?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, Chai tea.
Chai, Oregon.
Chai, Oregon.
Right.
Oregon Chai.
Oregon Chai, thank you. I'm glad people here know about it. So that is a really interesting mix of technology, enterprise, construction, and consumer products. So those are all great presenters. And tonight, kicking off the series with J.R. Storment and Dr. Jessica Brandis, who have the most fascinating story, both as founders of their own businesses. And what Carrie told me tonight, which I find utterly astonishing, is that J.R., you started Cloudability 4 days after your twins were born.
You're killing the story.
I can't process that. So I'm really
Diversity slide.
But yes.
So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you pulled that off. Incredible. JR co-founded Cloudability in 2011, serves as Chief Customer Officer, has held several startups. You've held several startups and experienced firsthand the challenges. The first decade of his career was as a web consultant, helping businesses like Sotheby's, Charles Schwab, and the Hawaii Tourism Authority. Oh, that sounds like a tough gig. Define a customer-centric technology strategy for their web platforms. Jessica Brandis is a naturopathic doctor, mother of the aforementioned twins, a biohacker and technology lover. I think you'd have to be a biohacker to actually do all those other things at the same time.
I agree with you.
Yeah. As founding physician of Infuse Health, which is the other startup in the family, she focuses on improving physical and cognitive performance, keeping her clients competitive in their fields. And with this startup, she also understands the challenges of work-life balance and running a business from scratch. So excited you're here. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you, JR.
This is actually a first time for me. I do a lot of talks and various things as part of the company, but I've never given a talk with my wife. So it's both frightening and exciting. So bear with us as we work this out. I don't know what she's going to say. So I want to tell a little bit of story of how we got started, because I think it really ties in with what the topic of the talk here is. Is it helpful if I'm in the light or out of the light? Yeah, it's probably over here.
Whatever makes
There we
you feel
go. What goes on stage?
You just look like a
for
Smurf when you're in.
It starts on a Monday afternoon, about 5 years ago. And leading up to this Monday afternoon, I had spent probably 3 or 4 months kicking around an idea with my future co-founder, Matt Ellis, our CEO, around a business that he had the idea for that we wanted to build together. And as business ideas go, they slowly evolve. You think it's going to start here and it goes there. And we sort of had worked it out over many months and had finally gotten to the point where we were ready to really sit down on this Monday afternoon and hash out the deal that we were going to have together. And literally, how we were going to work together, company financials, all that good stuff. So we met at a coffee shop in the southeast of Portland. What's it called? Forgetting it. It's 50th Division. And we've hashed out this deal. We worked out, okay, if we do this, here's how we're going to do the company together. Here's what it's going to look like. All that good stuff. We shook hands. High fives a little bit. Pretty exciting. And I went home. And I got home on this Monday afternoon, and my wife was in the bathtub, and she said, "We need to go to the hospital. I'm ready to have the twins." And I said, okay. So we went to the hospital, had the twins. There's a lot more in that story I won't go into. And we came back from the hospital, and the next day, Matt, co-founder, showed up at our house with a bottle of champagne. And he said, "Remember that thing we talked about, the coffee shop? I want to do it. I've raised a little money. Do you want to go all in?" I look at her. She's holding the babies.
In fairness, I was on Vicodin. Like a lot.
And we both kind of went, okay, let's do it. So we decided to start the company. Notably, to tell the story, Matt had also just had his third child under 3 at that point. Jessica was just entering her first, or was in her first year of med school, and was, I think, 2 weeks away from finals at that point.
I mean, I took 3 finals this Monday morning.
Right, a week after. So if you haven't seen those strap-on things where you can put your baby on the chest, the Mobies, she took one kid to the finals, strapped her chest to the finals a week after the kids. And I strapped the other one onto my chest and started working on the business, and that was sort of the first few weeks of the company. And her last week of that year. So that's sort of the story in which we found ourselves and how we started. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, from my end of the story, Cloudability is now 70 people. We just bought a company and opened an office in San Francisco. We've got an office in Boulder, an office in Australia. I just was down there last week. It's fun times. It's a startup. We're going fast. We've got big customers like GE and Nike and Adobe and Uber now. And it's kind of nonstop. And so that's the thing that we really wanted to talk about today together. And I'm going to stop talking soon and get to her, the more interesting stuff. What do you have to say when your wife's up there? Which is, sort of how we've fleshed out making initially my company work, making kids work, adding her company in, the medical degree, all that stuff together. So where should we start? What do we have? So I want to talk a little bit about startup life. And for anybody who's been in a startup, this type of thing might look familiar. This was an example of a day about, a year and a half ago. I did a talk on startup life a year and a half ago, and I pulled this together. It was basically like a transcription of my day. And it was kind of a crazy day. It was very, very busy. I did a similar version of that about a year later, and I pulled this one together. And it was very similar. It was early morning, late night. You notice in here, it's like, in both these, it's like, hang out with the wife at the end.
Was I awake for that?
Then, yeah, back here, probably not.
Probably not.
But there's just always sort of trying to fit all these things in. I mean, it's startup life. It's running a business. It's building and all that. I was going to update this today for this one, but I didn't have time because yesterday I was in San Francisco and last week I was in Australia, and we just doubled the size of the company in the last 4 months. So it's like it's been busy. So the thing that I want to highlight on the back of this is it's day 1740 of the company. Right? We've been doing it for a little under 5 years, and that's kind of every single day. Today was, right before I came, I said, it's a huge day, I had all these things, and it's kind of every day like that. So, what I found as started this process is that ultimately, startups begin as a sprint, and you start running as fast as you can, and we did that for the first 2 years, and then we found some success in it. It started to go, we started to have customers, and we had to try and transition into the world of running a marathon instead of running a sprint. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, sort of how we work that out both from a relationship standpoint, how she's helped me with the health side of it, and some of the tips and tricks that we've worked out there. Take it away.
This slide just says relationship. We're still together, which I find to be quite impressive after all of the things we've been through. I would say that for a really long time I'd heard about Cloudability like, 18 more months, and then there'll be an acquisition, or there'll be an exit, or there'll be or something will shift in 18 more months. And I heard that at 3 different intervals. And then I gave up on it, and I told him, in the conversation in our kitchen, don't ever tell me a timeline again, I can't handle it, it's not for me, right? You can't timeline the end of the startup, who knows, I don't know. Some of them get acquired really quickly and there's an exit, and some take 8 years. And the reality about this sprint to marathon is that we started at a deficit. We were sleep deprived, we had 2 extraordinarily hungry little people, and we would have 3 a.m. arguments over whose day was more important. I was in med school, I had a final, he had some sort of large meeting or something, right? And so it got really challenging for us to balance what about that business would take precedence over our children, and what would take precedence over his relationship with me, and what would take precedence over my relationship with my own work. And so out of that 3 a.m. bickering, sort of rules were developed about our relationship, which I think are applicable to anyone who's undergoing a startup who also potentially has children, or a dog. I'd put a dog in that category as well, or a turtle.
One of the great things, just to throw out a twin note for anybody who doesn't have twins. You know how kids get on bad sleep schedules and they go through 2-hour cycles sometimes, you have to get every couple hours? that 3 a.m. bickering had happened during a period where we were in 1.5-hour sleep cycles, except they were reversed. So we basically had 45 minutes in between a kid waking up, and this went on for some unknown number of months.
It was bad.
Yeah.
What's the next slide? Oh yeah,
You want to take this one or should I?
you can take it.
All right. So to kind of add to the story of this, 9 months into the company, we got accepted into Techstars, which is a tech accelerator that, in this case, they have them all over, but this one was in Texas, which is a long ways from Portland. And 9-month-old kids, still in med school, gonna go to Texas for basically 3 months. That was where we found ourselves. So I went out to Texas with Matt. We basically alternated weeks. I would do a week there, he would do a week here, we'd swap. On Saturdays we'd get together, we'd share notes, and we reverse again. So one of the things that came up during that time period for us was that there was some stuff that was just had to go. And it turned out that the 4 chickens that I had and loved had to go. Because I was basically never there, and she was dealing with kids in school and everything else, and something had to give. Which I think is a big topic of what, as we've gotten further and further into this mad escapade, we've realized is that every step we can, we're just trying to simplify, and simplify the pieces. You think about that world we have now of the Ubers available and the instant access to all these things, and we've kind of gotten to the place where we've had to, at every step we can, take advantage of those things. Because yesterday when I was leaving San Jose Airport, stuck in traffic to get my first meeting, I had to do the deck that I was working on for that meeting, and the only way I could do it was to take an Uber because I couldn't be driving. And I think that sort of, in a lot of ways, sums up where we found as a couple in relationship and into startups with twins, we've kind of had to lead everything. And I think myself to the next slide. Anything else you want to add on that one?
I would say that, for me as a person, there was a time when I was like, oh, I'll clean the house and I'll do all of these other things. And I would say that we have established some rules that we'll talk about later, but one of them is that I am responsible for the domicile. And I ultimately needed, for whatever reason, permission to sort of hire someone else to be responsible for the domicile. And so I had to hire a maid service because it's impossible to clean up after 2 boys and a dog, and 4 chickens who are now gone. It's impossible to do that and still maintain everyday life. And so I had to get permission to say, this isn't important. And so much so that we hired like an owner of a food cart to make us meals every week, such that we just had to like pop them in the oven and there they were. And she was wonderful and fantastic. And she did it for a year, where she just gave us these huge hotel pan things worth of food. And now we're even talking about selling our house, because who wants to be a homeowner? We don't have time for it. I don't want to rake another leaf ever.
Raked, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So simplifying is and still is this huge task that we work on in terms of like, okay, well that's a griping point. That's an argument that we have regularly, and how do we remove that? It turns out hire other people to do it is a really good option, and or sell your house.
I think that's the thing that everybody here is. I think most people a lot further along than a lot of the startup people when I talk to them at an accelerator. But people come to me and they hear the story of the twins at the start at the same time. And they say, well, how did you? Isn't that scary? Can you start such a high risk thing when you've got kids in the way? And for me, it was very clarifying to have kids on the way and this stuff coming, because at the end of the day, I had to make it work. I had to succeed. And in terms of the focus that brought, it also meant that my life has been pretty clear the last 5 years. I have 3 things. I have family, relationship, and I have the business. And I have time for nothing else. So as much as possible, I don't. Those are my hobbies and my everything else. Or I'm sleeping, because if you take 8 hours of sleep and 11 hours in the office, you don't have a lot of time left.
Your slide.
Take care of myself.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's in the vein of the startup sprint to marathon that I had realized early on I had to sort of give up was the ability to do anything outside of those 3 areas, and that every sort of waking hour had to be fit into as much as possible, building the base so that I could perform in those other areas. And a lot of what I think that, interestingly enough, our life together relationship has been built on over that time has been how do we try and make ourselves better, right? How do we actually improve both our kids' life and our life together, and ultimately our health, which is very much led into, I think, the profession that she decided to go into, and ultimately what we're going to be talking about tonight. So a couple pro tips we've learned along the way. Being in a relationship, being in startups, not having time, always answering the phone when she calls. I did this in the middle of a all hands at our company about 9 or 10 months ago. I found that it's a little tiny thing, but as long as I can pick up and say, hey, I can't even talk right now, at least, is everything okay? It's way better than trying to get back later. So,
in fairness, how often do I call?
not very often.
Not very.
I've trained her that if she calls.
Right, that's what. I think it's important. It's an important thing to understand about your spouse, which is that we text a lot, we email a lot, we have rules for like what gets texted and what gets emailed, and which email is it personal or is it work, and I know which one he's going to pay attention to more. So if I email to his work email, he's going to see it faster than if I email to his personal email. So we have rules about where certain information goes that have been established over time, and phone calls are reserved for emergencies. I need to talk to you right this minute, which doesn't happen very often. I would say the last one was 10 months ago. Like, it just doesn't happen very often.
Probably a few months ago, and I just wanted to chat. And she was like, what's wrong? What's happening?
Right.
I have a few minutes.
That was odd, yeah. And so we don't talk on the phone very often, and I think that's one of the reasons why. And I would say the other thing that's really interesting is I try to allow for a transitional time. It's really difficult for him or for me to be abruptly confronted with changing your hat, right? So he's working and is in this huge meeting, and I arrive at his office earlier than anticipated. Could I go upstairs and interrupt? Yes, I could. Do I do that? No, I don't, because my presence changes his focus really drastically, and that's ultimately not ideal, right? I also work at a nonprofit clinic called Outside In, and it caters to homeless youth and marginalized populations. So to be confronted with my children in the lobby right after I've had a potential heroin overdose is a really complicated situation, right? It requires me to change very drastically how I'm behaving and what I'm doing, and how I need to shift all of that focus. So respecting those transitional times has been a really important aspect of how we respect the other's work and how we respect each other, both in our home and outside of that as well.
This one we're actually really bad at.
So bad.
It seemed like a really good idea when we read about it in the book 3 or 4 years ago.
We still think it's a good idea.
I still contend it's a great idea.
It's a great idea.
But, given all those things laid out, it's like, when do we get together for coffee? When do we have a date night? Oh, we can do that one night. Can't get babysitter. So, I would contend that this is an aspirational goal, for us. Does anybody else have luck with this? Does anybody else actually get scheduled time with their loved ones? Or do they just make it happen?
Nice one, good.
All right.
Yeah.
On the back of that, though, what we've been a little better at is rituals. So this means we don't have to schedule it. It just kind of happens. Started with, for me and the boys, I was finding that it was too easy for Saturday mornings to have work in them and kind of creep in. So I drew a very fine line to say, Saturday mornings, we get up and immediately, we don't eat breakfast, we go to this one coffee shop right by Mount Tabor. We go, read a couple books, they eat a croissant and a quiche that they split, fight over who gets more of each, and then we go to hike up Mount Tabor. And that's been, let's say 90% of the Saturday mornings that I've been in Portland, which is most Saturdays, for 4 years. We know every trail on Tabor, and from the time they were 1 year old, they were toddling up that hill. Now they moan more about it, but they can go a little faster. And then that turned into Sunday evening or Sunday morning pancakes. So this for us is just having a few markers in life that schedule changes. We have put things on the schedules, they get moved, things cancel, and then designing, I think, our lives in a lot of ways around Saturday and Sunday are sacred, right? I take Sunday afternoon, I take a couple hours, I get ready for the week. But it's after this stuff, and otherwise it just didn't work. Agreeing the roles. This is an interesting one. I think
Because I'm so bossy.
yes. No.
Okay.
For me, this is essentially that they said I have those three things in my life that I can do. It's the family, relationship, and work. I kind of had to get in a place where I was like, look, you're in school, I'm doing this thing, I'm gonna be the guy who's making money right now, and that's gonna be the thing that I'm doing, and I'm gonna fail at some of the other things. And
he did.
I really did. But on the flip side of that, we developed an interesting role agreement that worked really well given what we do now, which is I basically let go of the steering wheel on sort of my health. Now, I eat right, I do those things, I do all that stuff, but I basically have given her the permission to run with, you tell me what I need to do. So I went to Australia last week. I don't ask her what I do, she just says, here's what you're gonna do, here's this regimen she's gonna follow. So sort of developing protocols around that has been really helpful for us as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting. This gets really tricky, particularly when it comes to the health of our children, because I do feel that is a joint responsibility that we equally share. And I would say that at times it creates a little bit of strife because he says sort of whatever you think, which is complicated because medical decisions come with pros and cons every single time. And ultimately I feel that if I'm the one making sole decisions, then I am to blame for whatever the outcome is. So it gets complicated there. But outside of that, I create protocols on a daily basis for clients. So his are a little more extreme, having to fly for 19 hours and wake up and it's 8 a.m. that time and hit the ground running.
I had 12 meetings in 3.5 days on site in Sydney and Melbourne, and then flew home the next day. So that's the typical week, right? And that's what she helps you with.
Right. So being highly functional at all of the necessary waking hours is tricky, and it's not easy to do without assistance. And so I design protocols. Some of them are maintenance protocols, right? Like how do I keep him from dying of a heart attack? Not good. And that's sort of the daily life. Or how do I help him when he goes to Vegas? Or how do I assist him in a transatlantic flight? Or how do I whatever? And he pretty much will just take anything I give him, which is very trusting. And I stick him with a lot of needles, and he hates needles.
Really had to work my fear of needles.
Yes, but you do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so proud of you. What's next? Oh, good. That's me. Okay, so to that end, I would say that in order to function in this way, we started at a deficit with extreme exhaustion. I didn't sleep for 2 years, I would say. I probably didn't sleep for 2 years. One of my children, I swear, is an insomniac, and I would give him Ambien if I could. Is not recommended for people under 18. Let's just be honest about that. So he's not getting it for quite some time. But he is a nightmare and wants to be awake, and he's a night owl and just wants to be up all the time. The other one is beautiful and sleeps really well. So, we started in a really bad place. Unlike a lot of people who start startups and maybe they're single or they're in a relationship, but everything's going swimmingly and they're getting their adequate amount of sleep and they're doing their thing and things start to slowly go downhill. We started downhill, really, really far downhill. And so the question was, for me, as I pursued my medical career, okay, so let's say that in the absence of actual disease, right? I don't have diabetes, I don't have scary, horrible things that are happening. Is there something beyond that? Because that's sort of where your primary care physician leaves you, right? I ran some blood work. You're not dying. Congratulations. Good luck. And I say that a lot, actually, or some version thereof. Because in my conventional life, I have 12 minutes with a patient. 12 minutes we have. That's it. That's the entirety of our visit. It's 12 minutes to say, we can either fix this, and or things look fine. Please continue on. Like, I wish you the best of luck with your health and management. And so it occurred to me that there must be something beyond this, right? Can we live more optimally? Could I feel better despite the lack of overt pathology that maybe is going on underneath? And so I sort of stumbled upon biohacking after using JR as a guinea pig for a couple years.
Hasn't killed me yet.
And have not close ones. And so, I think it's a really it's a really sexy way to say sort of live well, right? And we could just be talking about that, but there are some more fringe, more neuroscience things that go into it. It's been really fascinating for me to work on, but it does sort of start, with, it's a ghost, poltergeist. It does sort of start with the building blocks of health, okay? Please, can I have that?
Yes.
I probably will break it.
Ooh, sorry about that.
Showing off my mad skills. Mad skills, okay. So I would say to any of you that are in this room, if you don't know what your current health status is, you should go find out from someone, right? You don't know that you're a diabetic, you don't know that that number is getting questionable, or you don't know what the status of your heart health is, or your brain health, or you have no idea what's going on, please go find out, because that has to be addressed first. There's just no way back from that unless you start with the information that you have as soon as you have it. It's very, very difficult to reverse full-blown type 2 diabetes. It's totally possible, but it's very, very difficult. So starting at an earlier time when people can sort of say, okay, this is what I'm dealing with and I'm gonna work through it, is a much better place to go, or to start. These I would recommend to anyone, these things. If you're not sleeping, please begin. And I mean not just quantity, but also quality. Like if your sleep sucks, like mine does, and your children are waking you up 2-3 times at night for things, or you're just an anxious sleeper and you have a really hard time and you're laying in bed for 4 hours and you finally fall asleep, and then 3 hours later your alarm goes off. If these things are happening for you, you have got to look at this. Sleep is crucial. It is the only time in our adult life when growth hormone is produced. The only time. Deep sleep. That's the only time. So if you're sort of hovering in and out and constantly awake and peeing a lot or whatever it is that you're doing in the middle of the night, it's not benefiting you at all. DNA repair, that happens with growth hormone production. It doesn't happen outside of that. So it's an incredibly crucial period of time that you need to really be down. Like be in bed, be asleep, be down. If you are super tech friendly and you want an app to track that, please get Sleep Cycle. It's really fascinating. I find that that which gets tracked gets improved. We're very competitive with ourselves, so download it, get it on your phone, start using it, look at what your cycle is
I was
like.
skeptical about that. As much as I'm in tech, I hate
Obsessed,
apps.
he's obsessed.
I don't like apps. I want to like get in my browser, I have Spotify, I have a few things, but I don't want to download an app. And I started using this app and I actually added an hour a night to my sleep because I just woke up every morning and saw it and I wanted to improve it and gamify it. So highly recommend it.
It's really good. This is super unpopular, but I would say that if at all possible, go alcohol-free for some period of time. Maybe forever, maybe just for 2 months, but go alcohol-free for some period of time. It disrupts our sleep through a very well-known mechanism. It changes the way that our brain works. Our brain is really foggy the day after alcohol, even if we don't wake up overtly hungover.
Intentional crosshair. Water.
And if you can't do that, or you're unwilling to do that, and I will be honest and say that lots of networking and business deals happen over drinking, and I'm not one to say like, oh, you cannot have that Amarone for the table, don't have that. If you're gonna drink, then be sure you're mitigating every possible effect of it. And that can look a number of different ways, but I often carry around like fancy little pills. Some people have had them, they work pretty well. To mitigate the possible effects of hangover the next day, because they make you really unproductive. Alcohol use makes you really unproductive. So not advisable at this stage of any startup or life. Exercise is arguably the best tool that we have for any mental health issue. It's been shown to decrease effects of depression more than any other drug or other pharmaceutical or other combination product at all. So it's a really impressive tool that you can be using on a regular basis to maintain sort of regular health, right? So cardiovascular health, respiratory health, mental health, all of those things can be taken care of with exercise. And the last thing that I consider to be a basic thing is meditation. Countless studies have suggested that it increases neuroplasticity, so your ability to think faster, more creatively, and with more advanced cognitive work can be done with meditation. There's a great app called Buddhify. Do it before you sleep. Do it for 5 minutes. Do it for 10 minutes if you're feeling super fancy. If you're not into it, try to get there. I am struggling with this. I do go to yoga. Arguably, that's a level of meditation.
Another pitch for the app too.
I do find it complicated.
That is really helpful for me because meditation is also something I wanted to aspire to do, and I never actually did it. And the great thing about that app or ones like this is there's like 5-minute ones, and they're purpose driven. There's the you're on a train meditation, you're on a plane meditation, you're about to go to bed, and just those few minutes here and there. I mean, stacking them in. I texted her earlier today in between 2 intense meetings, having a really hard time. She's like, just take 5 minutes. That's all I need. And it does, you know, in my experience, and I'm new to this. I just started doing that portion of it this last year. It has a big impact on just how I'm able to get through insanity.
It does. I see it for you. Okay, so this is where the more biohacking level of thing comes in. So that FBWA actually stands for Functional Blood Work Analysis, and then there's DNA testing too. I would say that arguably it's quasi-controversial in the medical community to perform DNA testing. 23andMe does it. I'm sure people have heard of it or have experimented with it. You spit in a tube, you send it off, they like email you a bunch of things. I actually think it's really interesting, and the FDA shut them down for some period of time, and then the FDA said, it's fine, go ahead. The thing about DNA testing, we can test your entire chromosome, the entire 23 chromosome pattern, we have that information now. Unfortunately, we don't know what to do with a lot of it, and so it's like collecting data for the purposes of curating data. Like, we just don't know what to do with all that information. But some of it we actually do, and some of it is really interesting. And the one that I think is most commonly tested by myself and then other practitioners as well is this MTHFR gene, which some of you may have or may have not heard about. And any sort of MTHFR challenge or genetic deficit changes the way that we methylate things and the way that we reduce certain amino acids. In that way, it's been implicated in early onset heart disease, it's been implicated in intractable depression, which means that you have some sort of mental health condition that can't be modified with any type of pharmaceutical at all. And then also sort of early first trimester miscarriages as well. So it's a really fascinating gene to get more information about. And I would say that that feeds directly into the controversy around supplements and whether or not you should be taking them or not taking them, and are they useful or are they not useful. Arguably, some of the studies around supplements have been performed on really terrible quality supplements. So one of the most popular studies that came out about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago.
In the New York Times.
Yes, was actually done on Centrum Silver. I don't know if you've been to Target lately, but that's not a very expensive vitamin and ultimately doesn't really provide people with a lot of goods at all. And one of the reasons that supplements have failed to demonstrate really good efficacy is around this DNA testing and how you utilize certain forms of certain vitamins. So it's a really fascinating thing for me to have about someone, because I can very quickly change the form that I use for someone who's struggling with that, and it makes a very significant difference.
For example, every time I say this, she corrects me on the actual details, but
Sure.
I have one of these genetic deficiencies, NTFHR, and as a result, is that right?
No.
No, one of those. I can't process regular B vitamins. Like if I take them, they just basically go through me, and that's one of the results of this. But there's a type of methylate
Sure.
B vitamin that actually, with the genetic mutation that I have, I'm able to absorb. There's little things like that that type of testing is really should look at as you're going into the basic health stuff to say, well, what's the right one for me?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting thing because a lot of people associate B12 with being really energy producing, and it is in so many ways, unless you're this person, and arguably a good portion of the population is that person, that doesn't process it well, and you get that form of it, which is not terribly effective. So it's a really interesting tool to have, and generally covered by insurance, almost always, because we know so much about it, and it is one of the most well-studied sort of genomic interpretations. And these are all just pieces of data, but they really do show us a lot, right? So that's a good place to start if you want to get into biohacking. And then supplementation, again, controversial. I don't love supplements for supplement's sake. I think a lot of people are like, I'm on fish oil and probiotics and vitamin D every day. I take it every day, feels great. And I think arguably for some people, maybe it does feel great. For the rest of us, we're like, it's really expensive. It's expensive. I take a lot of pills that are expensive. and maybe not with a lot of noticeable or tangible benefit. So I approach clients in two ways. One is that I'm looking at your numbers, yes, because I want to make sure that you're not in a dangerous place. Like, strokes are bad, heart attacks are bad, we don't want to be there. So I like to get people out of that, but that doesn't necessarily make people feel different. I can show you data points, you were here and now you're here, this is way better. But that doesn't change someone's experience in their body. I would say that some supplements actually do. And so that's a really important thing to keep in mind. One of the ones that we have in our house, because we have toddlers and they start at preschool and they get sick a lot, is a supplement we use for any type of respiratory infection at all. And we haven't taken antibiotics in, how long has it been since you took an antibiotic?
I don't know if I've had one since we had kids.
Right, a long time.
Yeah.
It's been good.
Functional blood work and the scales in there, how's that different than regular blood testing?
Scales.
The level of specificity it has around where you actually sit.
Oh boy. One of the places that's really clear to see that is in lipid differentiation. So we talk about LDL being bad for you and HDL being good for you, and that is mostly true in the way that like a children's fable is true. That there's just a lot more layers and complexity and sort of like moral things happening there. And so functional blood work actually breaks down what types of LDL you have and what types of HDL you have. And then ultimately, LDL is not really bad for you unless it is bad for you in the presence of inflammation. So I like to run inflammation markers. I think it's a really important thing. It's not specific. So the inflammation marker could be high because you have a cold. It could be high because you have cancer. It could be high because of whatever. You eat a lot of Doritos. I don't know. But it ultimately, having high lipids is not in and of itself terrible for you. It's what the inflammation does in the presence of high lipids that is terrible for you. And so that's where that blood work is a really good tool. Right. I do a lot of IV therapy. So I have a mini lab, and I mix together a bunch of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and fancy things, and I stick them all in a big bag, and then I run them directly into JR's arm.
Usually before a transatlantic flight
Yeah.
or a week in Vegas for a conference.
Sure. And then you can do maintenance ones over time. I do them to myself and other people, and I think they're really interesting. It's like mainlining the best about nutrition. And they have people turn the corner really quickly. And so it's popular. I think that sort of Dave Asprey, who's the founder of Bulletproof Coffee, has made them popular, and sort of Tim Ferriss and the group of individuals who are sort of pushing for biohacking has made IV therapy really popular. And certainly it works for a healthy individual to experience a boost in energy, sleep, cognition, function in general. It also, is a nice adjunctive treatment to chemo and cancer therapies. I don't do them in that way. It's not a task that I want to have for someone. But I use them all the time for myself just to feel better, right? Or to prepare for a meeting.
I feel like I've had 3 good nights of sleep after I have one.
Yeah.
It was a good thing.
And if you're going to Vegas, and you're going to be awake from 5 in the morning until 3 in the morning every day for 4 days, you're going to take a beating. And this helps sort of lessen that experience just a little bit. Pretty well, actually. I think it works pretty well for you, particularly, yeah. Works pretty well.
I haven't gotten sick on any of this trips yet.
I know, it's amazing. And then this is a really popular conversation right now, cognitive enhancers. And there's 2 categories of them, so everything falls into the category of cognitive enhancers, but there's also nootropics, which some people know about. Does anyone here know what a nootropic is or has heard of that? 1, okay, 2, oh my god, it's amazing. 3 went up, okay. A hesitant 3, I'll take it. So cognitive enhancers, yes, I could say that Adderall and Ritalin, like methylphenidate, fall into that category. I don't know if anyone who's taken Adderall or Ritalin without an actual diagnosis of ADHD has been like, wow, I felt really dumb on that drug. That's not what happens. They're stimulants. They wake up your brain very, very abruptly. They are, however, not without their side effects. And so in general, I would say I don't prescribe them to people, nor do I recommend them to be taken in that way. That being said, they do fall into that category. And there are other drugs that fall into that stimulant category, like caffeine. It's the smart drug no one knows they're taking, but you are. Anytime you drink coffee, you are getting the boost of caffeine, and it is working really well for a lot of people. Nicotine is certainly considered to be a cognitive enhancer, not in the way where it's paired with cigarettes. That's obviously carcinogenic to an extent, but nicotine on its own as an isolated compound is really fascinating. And it really does help a lot of people. Particularly, I would say, like if you're on a 18-hour drive and feeling tired, nicotine gum might really assist you in that moment. It's pricey, but kind of worth it actually. And then, you know, the one that I think everyone's been chatting about lately is modafinil. And it's a really interesting drug in that it's very stimulating without affecting your brain chemistry very much, at least not in the way that Adderall and methylphenidate do. So, from personal experience, I would say it's quite exciting to be on one of those drugs. I feel really great about the work that I'm about to do and the work that I will do for the next 16 hours. And so that's a really nice feature. It's not a long-term solution, however, and so that's where nootropics sort of come in. Nootropics are anything from herbs to chemical compounds that actually increase memory, mood, learning capacity, neuronal recruitment, flexibility of mind. So these things have been well studied since the 70s and are available in the UK and Russia quite widely. And here, less available, but not regulated by the FDA, so you can simply go online and purchase them and then take them. It's confusing, the world of nootropics, how to take them, when to take them, how much, what should I expect, what's the half-life. All that information is confusing, and so I do try to help my clients navigate those waters if this is where we are, right? If at the end of an 18-hour day you still have 3 hours left to go, and that is your daily life, then a cognitive enhancer might be where you want to start thinking about, you know, your next tool to get through the next 2 years of your life. The beautiful thing about nootropics is that in order to be qualified as a nootropic, they have to have little to no side effect profiles at all and extraordinarily low toxicity. So, and actually offer neuroprotective benefits. So they're a really interesting class of things that you can be using to help your brain function. And I find them to be quite effective if used properly with the right outcome in mind. I think some people just use them and take whatever is classified as a cognitive enhancer and then they're like, oh, that didn't work at all. And it's because they're measuring it against the wrong outcome. Celebrate.
Celebrate small wins. Yeah, with this last 5 years, the way it's been, I think that the thing that we just kind of wanted to close on here was it's really hard in startup life and business life, as you guys all know, to keep perspective around when things are going well, right? I think that as an entrepreneur, I anyway have been very driven to be better and do the next thing and hit the next goal and milestone. And I really easy to forget about the thing that I did yesterday that went pretty well. That meeting I had at noon that made me forget to eat lunch, unfortunately, but it went pretty well. And I think, you know, in the vein of relationship and kids and everything else, that's something that we're really trying to focus on, which is we're still here. The kids are alive and clothed and usually relatively clean. They don't like to wear pants at home.
That's true.
Who does?
No one.
They really don't. So, you know, it's, I think, how many people here are entrepreneurs? How many are in service industries like legal or attorneys or a couple of those? What are the rest of you?
One of each.
One of each? All right.
What wannabes?
Wannabes, yeah. So, I mean, we all work really, really hard. And we constantly set bigger and bigger and bigger goals for ourselves. And we try and go after those as hard and fast as we can. And for me, I constantly try and remind myself this because it's a big treadmill, right? And it's like, I want to get to the final destination. You know, starting out the company, it's like, oh, we can sell this in this time. We can do this, you know, we're going to hit this thing. And in that vein of going from the sprint to the marathon, at this point, I just love being in the company. I love the chase. I love building. I love doing these things. I don't have the end goal as much in mind now, because ultimately we put a lot of work into trying to balance out family and health and these times, and my goal is to get in that groove and stick in that groove. So I would just encourage everybody here, and sort of speaking from the challenge that I have every day, to think about how to focus on those little things and realize, I'm going to be super cliche here, it's all about the journey, not the destination.
Oh boy. I think with Carrie's permission, we would open the floor to questions. I'm a pretty open individual, so you're welcome to ask questions about your health, provided that it's like potentially applicable to others. Otherwise, find me afterwards and ask me individually. My business, his business, our relationship, and how we've survived, and how why we don't hate each other, is a really good are all good questions. So if anyone has any questions at all, we would take them. Yeah, in the back there, sir.
Yeah, one, you mentioned relationships, but you didn't mention your parents at all, or friends outside the immediate family.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have friends?
A couple. Not as many as I'd like, to be honest, It's, I do another version of a startup talk. We've never done this before, so this is the first time, but about surviving startups. And one of the things we talk about in there is, like, I spend more time with my coworkers than I do my family. Every day, more hours. I have more one-on-one time with my direct reports than I do with my wife each week. And so, it's true.
Can I have a raise?
I had 8 or 9 hours of one-on-ones this week, right? How much time do we spend one-on-one? As part of that, and Matt and I have had this couple rules with hiring over the years for this very reason, which is, we don't want to hire assholes, and we want every hire. It's like, you got to think about the 8-hour airport rule, which is like, if I was stuck in an airport with this person for 8 hours, am I going to want to blow my brains out? And if they fail those, then it's not worth it. So I mean,
because
yeah,
they're your only friends.
because that's, I feel cliche saying this, but I mean, those people also do become your friends. And I think it's important to make the choice that I'm going to be around these people a lot. And that's part of the beauty of being an entrepreneur, is I can choose who I want to be with and what I want to do with them and all those things. But yeah, more friends would be good later, when one of those 3 things is, a little less intense.
I have more friends.
Family's great. I mean, they're just not close for us. They don't live here. So we see them, we go or they go. But that's also added to the complexity of the last 5 years, which is
Right.
no relatives living in Portland. So we get to visit them on occasions, but.
Everyone who enjoys spending time with their kids.
And we don't travel to them as much as they'd like either.
No.
because First 3 years, we're like, I'm sorry, we're not going anywhere
No,
with the
nowhere.
kids, so you're coming to us.
It's true.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, ignoring the fact that family doesn't live here, how would you compare Portland as a place to start a company to other cities that you have insight into?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love this topic. I think Portland has kind of proven itself in the last few years. Everybody loves a great example of Sam at Elemental. I mean, we finally, and Simple's exit and all these things, we finally got to a place where there are companies exiting, there's companies growing and being super successful, the Puppet Labs and those folks. That wasn't the case 5 or 6 years ago, it feels like. I mean, there were little ones here and there, and some companies that did great, and Midcon's going to be a great example. But the ideas, I think, that's changed is that people like VCs are willing to invest money in companies here now. They weren't as much 5 or 6 years ago. Hiring here has gotten easy because everybody wants to get out of San Francisco and move up to Portland so they can buy a house, and live a good life. So, I mean, we get a large number of people who are coming out. Actually, we moved in a guy from Canada, right? They want to come here. So I think it's a great place to build a business. Go back down to San Francisco a lot, down there like 3 times a month probably. Super exciting, there's a lot going on, but it's just, the lifestyle is not what it is here. And if I was single in my 20s again, which is what I was when I lived in San Francisco, I'd be all over it. But to have a place you can build a business and have a family and own a house if you want to, or not, it's pretty special.
We lived out the parcel for your chickens, but land here fits perfectly.
There you go.
Yes.
I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. I'm curious about a comment you made about getting rid of your house.
Yeah.
And I know that to me that's a write-off. Now, owning a business also, you can
Yeah.
write a lot of things off. So I'm kind of like entertaining that idea as well. Should I
Yeah.
sell this house? I don't need this house anymore. So you guys are obviously two very smart people. So what are the benefits that you see from owning a home outside of the write-off of the income tax? But also, what are the benefits that you can also help someone like me make that decision, right? So it'd be interesting.
We
I
just
wanna-
I mean,
had a
I
big
would
fight
just,
with
I
my
would just
mother about
disclose
this.
firstly that we're not estate planners, nor can we give you legal or real estate advice.
But that's exactly the point, which is,
Okay.
look, there's no question that like owning property and owning a house can be a good financial decision. People have built all that. It's not a financial decision for us. We're not selling our house because we think that's the right financial choice.
We kind of do though.
Well,
We do a little bit
market's
for
hot,
us.
you know,
Yeah.
so that's cool.
The market's good.
But it's about like, okay, take that off the table. I want to simplify my weekends. I want to get closer and simplify my commute. You know, I don't want to, when something breaks, have to call somebody and fix it or try and fix it myself, which I'm terrible at.
So bad.
The one resource we don't have is time. And one
And
of the
time
biggest,
is money, right?
what's that?
Yeah.
And time is money.
And yeah, and one of the
Absolutely.
biggest consumers of time that we can remove and stress and thought and scheduling is this big house with all the things go with it. So
You have to live someplace. I mean,
Oh,
with 2
yes.
kids, that's just.
We have to
There-
live somewhere? Oh, we did not consider that at all in our decision.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
kids need space.
I
It's
feel like
like,
we're
that
committing
was
to selling
one
the
thing
house
for
now.
us, it's like,
We're really committed.
it's hard to take care of this place, but.
You're totally right. I would say that, you know, we are a quasi-tight family, and that I am unable to go to the restroom by myself. So we're very, very close
That's
as humans, as the children.
more than me.
You know, we are looking at, what do we have now, 2,600 square feet? It's not that much, right? It's not it's not palatial by any stretch of imagination, but we don't use 35% of it. I have 4 toilets and I live with 3 men. This is not acceptable to me as a woman. Like, it's not okay. So we don't use a good portion of our home. That being said, we spend, like many Portlanders, a lot of time outside. We have 4 bikes and 1 car. I mean, that's on purpose that we do that, right? So it's not that we feel that we'll be depriving anybody of space, and certainly if we should seek space, we can get it. But it is an issue for us of cutting down on commute. Certainly school district wasn't a factor in our lives when we bought our original house, and it is now as our children are about to go to kindergarten. So that changes several dynamics. It's not right for everyone to cut ties with all of their real estate property and let it go. In this particular moment, we feel that it's right for us. But again, like, that comes down to the relationship, and you know, I would say that one side we don't have on there is this honest communication, and we are excruciatingly honest with one another. And it is not always super positive in the moment when you first like lay on your partner, oh, let's give up the house we've had for 6 years, or oh, something awful. But you know, it just leads to breaking tension that is already there, and ultimately we can grow together in that way. So it hasn't always been easy, certainly, but you know, we make decisions that are right for our family and right for us, and it's, you know, it can't be like widely applied to all individuals. But if it's causing you strife and you're some sort of landlord to other people, and like that's irritating, and the emergent phone calls that aren't really emergent are getting on your nerves, then like I give you permission to let it go. If that's the issue. But if you really feel that it's helping you financially, or it's a long-term asset, or there's something to that, then by all means keep it. But you know, if you need some sort of like sign from God, not that I pretend to be that, but you know, let it go if it's bothering you, or if it's causing you more stress than it's worth. I think we just get challenged by that often. Like, I must keep the thing, must
It's a
let the
lovely
thing
house,
go.
what if we don't have it? Well, we'll spend more time with our kids outside. Oh, it's not so bad.
Yeah, sounds
That won't
bad.
be, yeah.
You have a question.
Yeah, so it's kind of around having a family. So
Sure.
obviously your sons were born as you were starting this, so they've never known you not working this pace,
Correct.
probably.
Yeah.
But for you, with you building your business, is there some sort of struggle now as they're kind of becoming more self-aware? Like, why are you going to work? Another meeting, another.
me or for
Because I get that with my
Yeah.
kids, you know.
For me, no, I'm super excited. Like, I gotta go. For them, I would say to some extent, sure. It's a conversation that we have occasionally. It's, it happens less now that we're out of that separation anxiety phase, and we have some really fantastic nannies and babysitters that they really love and they spend a lot of time with, and I make sure that when I'm not there, they have a really special time, and I try to make the time we have together less special, and not always intentionally, but there is a sort of part that I'm like, okay, well, I know where the day is going, and ultimately you're going to be put to bed by a nanny and not by me, and so I'm going to make sure you have a really fun time with that person, and like kind of a less fun time with me. So it's certainly a conversation we have. Ultimately, this comes down to taking care of yourself, which is that I am not a stay-at-home mom type. That is not, it is so hard to do, and I think it's amazing when people can do it, because I wanted to drink myself into oblivion as a stay-at-home mom. It is so extraordinarily difficult to do that, and so I have a massive amount of respect for it. I cannot make it work. I think I could if they were like 12. And had things and activities and friends, but at 2 years old, no, oh my, whoa. Like JR sent me to California, he was like, go to this hotel that I booked for you. Like, please get on this plane, goodbye. And that was so needed for me because I was losing it, and I was quick my temper was quick and I couldn't manage it. And so ultimately I provide a better version of myself to them when I'm fulfilled intellectually. And so teasing apart people's illness and disease and puzzles, like, very exciting for me. Unfortunate that that's happening for someone else, but like fun for me. And so, I'm bringing them a better version of myself. And ultimately, I hope that helps me raise a better human. And I help put them in environments that I feel are supportive and consistent and helpful for them. And, that's kind of the best I can do as a parent, I think. I'm open to suggestions. It's complicated.
It definitely is something that to manage with them. Where did Ollie say I lived at the time?
On an airplane. He needs to live on an airplane.
Yeah, so that's the challenge of it, and that's why the rituals and the time become increasingly more important.
Yeah.
So earlier on in the talk, you mentioned communicating with each other through email, a couple email accounts, texting, phone calls. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, and this may get into apps a little bit, so I apologize. But the world we live in today, the amount of the means by which one can communicate with one's loved ones have just gone through the roof. Multiple apps, Snapchat, texting, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want to communicate with people. Do you think that's been helpful to you managing this lifestyle? Is it a hindrance? Is it a downside?
The biggest technological improvement to our communication was the day that messages arrived on the laptops, of Apple laptops, where instead of me having to pull out my phone and do this to her, I could just type it and not break my flow. Like, that literally changed our communication because I hate doing this, right? And it was all just there. But that's pretty much all we use. It's Apple messages.
Yeah.
Which goes to the phone, to the computer, to the iPad. It's just one thing.
I would say that neither of us are like Facebook. Like I don't post status updates frequently at all, and when I do, he already knows. So there's social media tools. I think if you're using them for business purposes or to generate your brand, by all means, like it's a sufficient tool for those. And Instagram similarly, depending on what you're doing. I think because we're not completely private people, we're careful about what goes into those spaces, and so we don't communicate that way personally. But it doesn't mean that like occasionally I don't find a picture of them on a hike on Facebook, right? Like I'll scrolling through Facebook and I'm like, oh, there's my children, amazing, there they are. Good to know everyone's alive, and so. It hasn't improved our communication. I certainly think that it could for some people who use it in that way. But for us, they're just tools and not for communication. We save the majority of our communication for in-person. But there's occasionally, what do you think of this dress? Before I spend your money on it. Or, something stupid. We communicate in that way. Yes, sir.
When you talk about your 4 points, 4 or 5 points about caring for yourself.
Sure.
When you talk about exercise and meditation, then
Yeah.
that's something each day you're saying carve some time out for that, never give it up.
Yeah.
And
Not
sometimes-
never, just,
well, I mean,
just keep coming back to it.
That, I mean, meditation is like a word, I hear that all the time.
It's a buzzword.
It's a buzzword. How do you define that?
Okay.
Because I mean, I find meditation when I go jog, I go run up to or something, like.
Oh, I'm not saying that they're isolated or that they are functionally independent.
I often hear it presented in an isolated way, like meditation,
Sure.
other thing.
I don't disagree with you that that's how they're presented, but I would say that that's not my personal belief, right?
Okay.
I think that you could very easily exercise and meditate at the same time. So I make light of my yoga practice. Like I joke about it. I'm like, I do yoga. Because I'm quasi self-deprecating. That's my sense of humor, right?
Okay.
But that's a very serious time for me. I take 3 hours a week at most, right? Because that's the best I could possibly do, is take 3 hours a week to do that. Between childcare and my job and my clients and my things and whatever. It's the best I can do. And those 3 hours are life-changing for me and incredibly important. And I am exercising while meditating, right? Because meditating simply means the ability to check in with yourself, to be really aware and conscious about what's happening for you, to attempt to let that go, which you're facilitating by exercising, by the way, in all of the things that exercise does for us. So I think you could absolutely do them at the same time. Question is like, which one of them is a hook for you? So, for you, it sounds like exercise is the hook that gets you thinking, and for others, it's the thinking that gets them making progress. So, I am trained by my education as a naturopath, but I'm the most aggressive naturopath I know. And the reason that I am that way is because I do what works for you, or works for that person. And it is not a one-size-fits-all. So if you're able to meditate while running, and running for you is different than running for me, which is like, my lungs are on fire, I'm gonna die, I think I need an inhaler, I should buy cheese at the grocery store. Like, that's what I think about when I'm running, because it's horrible for me. Like, things are on fire. It is not fun. By the way, 23andMe suggests that I'm a sprinter and not a marathon runner. I'm just gonna put that out there. If that's not what running is for you, then you're probably meditating while doing it. Kudos for being able to combine those things together, right? Weightlifting for me is like different than weightlifting for him. Like, Jared gave up his gym membership, he can't stand it, but I really like it. I like feeling strong and powerful and those things. So it's different for everyone, and they're not mutually exclusive, I would say. In the back, over there. Latecomer.
You brought up sleep in some different ways. And,
Yep.
One thing I haven't heard cross the radar in all of this is polyphasic sleep, and I wonder if it's something I'm curious to ask both of you, given the crossover of both startup culture, down-to-the-minute scheduling, and biohacking a little bit.
Yep.
When I was writing a thesis, I went to triphasic sleep, sleeping 3 times a day.
Did that work for you?
It did. It took me a month to get
hard.
into it, but I found cognition went up, memory went up. But I'm also curious, whether that works in startup culture, and potentially even creating a startup around saying, you know what, we're a company that sleeps, on the Dymaxion schedule, or we sleep triphasically, and
sure, interesting.
And you need, we're here at 4, but we're gone at noon, and is there value in that from your own understandings of it? Is it sustainable living in an industrial world?
Okay. I will speak to the part not about company culture, because I don't hire or employ 7-day people, and so I will allow him to speak to whether or not that is possible to be implemented into a company culture. But what I will say from a biochemical and from a physician standpoint is that triphasic or phasic sleep is extraordinarily difficult to get to, so congratulations on being able to get there, and B, to maintain. I think that it works for some people in the same way that I think ketogenic dieting or intermittent fasting or any of those types of sort of aggressive and extreme efforts to improve cognition can work for some people. I think ketogenic dieting doesn't really work for women, but it works really well for men. There's an interesting there's an interesting piece about epigenetics and will it work for you versus will it work for someone else. I don't know that there's a massive amount of benefit to being in triphasic sleep as opposed to being in high quality, sort of what we would call like normal or monophasic sleep. But on the flip side of that, I would say that as a parent, it's unbelievably unsustainable because my child's preschool is from 9 to 5, because my work life is from 9 to 5, because all of these reasons that people have these social constructs around, I'm unable to break them in an effort to suggest that somehow triphasic or biphasic sleep would be really beneficial, right? So I do have to some extent conform to what societal norms would be put out there, which would essentially make me unable to sustain that model. Though if I were to go to a sleep lab or something, I would be really interested to see what happened. But it's just like I'm not able to do that. I will let you speak to whether or not it's culturally, like company
I don't
culture.
have a lot of input on that one. I mean, that was kind of more early days. We did shit whenever we had to do shit. Now we have much more scheduled time, but we have people in different time zones and all that. So, I think just on a slightly broader topic, I mean, as a company, the thing that's been interesting for me as a transition the last couple of years has been going from a bunch of generalists to more specialists. And specialists sometimes work in very different ways than the rest of them. And they have very specific modes of operating. So I think that's one of the challenges I think of growing and figuring out how to fit everybody in together, but then also, you need to go off into your cave and you need to interact with people all day. So I don't have a strong answer to that. I feel like it's interesting, but we haven't anybody asked yet.
So if somebody asked and said they were a brilliant candidate, they proved to have an amazing track record, but they said, I function the best on triphasic sleep and this is what my working hours would be, would you consider that person for hire and allow them the space to do that?
Definitely more challenging.
That wasn't really my question.
Well, I'm very not black and white. Very
That's
good.
true.
But just to kind of like riff off of that, if I was a developer, which I am, but I was coming to Cloudability, and would I get an answer from you that if I was talented enough and I'm committing enough code, you don't really care when I work as long as the commits are coming in, or is that unsustainable because you need that face-to-face time, in the conference rooms?
Well, so I am now on the selling side of the business, so that would be a very different conversation for the building side of the business. I think traditionally people would think of, that's the first thing you think of, somebody's going to do that, be an engineer, right? They're going to stay up late, bust it out, sleep in the middle, whatever the periods are. But I feel like for anywhere in the company, like engineering culture is almost the most important thing, and the bond between them and the challenges that we're facing now with having engineers in 3 different states. That's hard to overcome, compared to just having everybody in the same place. We just split into multiple floors, and that got tough, right? So, I think that would be the challenge there, of just how to keep people aligned, how do you manage expectations around, well, I am, managing this person who's doing that, I know they're delivering, but how does that feel for everybody else who's coming at these hours? So, I don't know, we're not there right now. I think we're very much focusing on, now that we're not all sitting in a room this size or that size, how do we make sure that there is cohesion between vision and needs and everything? So I don't think it would be out of the question, and I wouldn't speak for the engineering side of the house on that because I'm not sure what the official stance would be. I just think it would be challenging to integrate that in. That being said, we've got a fairly flexible policy around, like we don't say in at 9, out at 5, whatever. It's like we have an open vacation policy. People take the time they want. Some people take long chunks. Some people take a ton of 3-day weekends. We have certain roles where it's really about the metrics are clear. So support roles, right? And it's like I can very easily track your responses to times, and I need you to be in different time zones based on time. So I think there's areas that it could work, but I'd be hesitant to say, yeah, totally, that would be fine.
I'll come back. Yes. And this gentleman, green vest.
Oh.
This child. Oh boy.
That is a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question was about the IV.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine poking myself with like an IV. But
I
I'm
would do
sort
it
of
for you.
curious. I'm curious on sort of what do you see as the benefits and what are the contents? What is in there?
Sure. So the contents change based on how much information I have about someone, right? So do I have their genetic information? Do I know what's going on in their heart, arteries, cholesterol, stuff? Like how much information do I have? Would change what I do for any given person. And then what is the outcome that they want, right? Are they trying to improve anxiety? Do they have some physical symptoms that we're trying to improve? Are they acutely ill? Is it just preparatory for a long weekend of abuse, right? Like up a lot, smoking cigarettes, drinking a lot, so that kind of thing. So the outcome guides how I mix it together. Ultimately, it's a combination of what we call cofactors. So you're talking about vitamin C, all of the B vitamins in various amounts depending on what we are doing. They're so incredibly important to neuronal communication between brain and heart, brain and muscle, nerve function, all of those things. Magnesium, which is responsible for over 300 different enzymatic reactions in the body. So to give that to someone IV as opposed to orally, has anyone ever tried to say like a mega dose of vitamin C ever? Like a lot of vitamin. It doesn't go well. It's not going to go well for you. Your digestive tract cannot handle that level of vitamin C, nor can it handle that level of magnesium. But the reality is I can bypass that and give it to you intravenously, and your body knows exactly what to do with it, and it doesn't get confounded by this like oral absorption route. For people that struggle with digestion, Crohn's, UC, IBS, these things that we're just like plagued with, these digestive complaints that people have, arguably they're not absorbing nutrients in a way that's helpful to them at all. And so if we can bypass that system and then get the body to do something differently with all of those things and the right forms of these vitamins, then people can experience anything from decrease in migraines to decrease in asthmatic symptoms to increased energy, decreased fatigue, decreased fibromyalgia. I mean, they've been studied and used for a very, very long time. You could look away. I cover JR's with a towel. Like, he can't look at it. He just freaks, he can't see it. He knows it's happening, but he can't look at it. And ultimately, it's, the actual stick is uncomfortable, like any blood draw or something would be. But after that, it's pretty benign, It's not really uncomfortable at that point.
I sat on the couch on a Saturday before I got my flight.
That's true.
We watched a movie with the kids. Once it's there, it's just there.
It's just present. So we can change a lot about how someone functions and how someone feels in their body very, very quickly. I mean, it's like within 4 hours, and sometimes immediate. I think it's really interesting how smart the body is, and people can taste it very quickly, even though I'm not delivering it right through their mouth, but people can actually taste it
Within like 5 seconds.
almost
you get
immediately.
This vitamin D taste that hits your tongue, even though it's over here there.
So it's a really fascinating experience for people. I would say that, does it make a super significant difference for everyone? No. But does it change 70% of people's experience? Yeah. So that being the case, I think it's really an interesting tool. They're all just tools. Like, no one can really say, this is going to fix you completely, or this is going to make everything different for you. But we could say statistically that that's probably true, right? And I would say statistically, IV therapy makes a huge difference for a lot of people. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I have 2 questions for JR. One was quick, probably. What, your crazy schedule that you have up there, what have you found is your best management tool? I know you hate apps, but how do you manage that schedule and keep it in sync with her schedule so that you guys are able to be aware of each other?
So what was the last bit of that? So
keeping aware of each other's schedules. What programs do you guys like to use to manage all that? And then the second question is, I would love to hear a little bit about the cultural challenges that you had in your company as you started growing it, and what you found were good ways to manage that as you grew.
I'm bad at keeping her in sync with my schedule.
So bad.
That's the thing
really
I get
terrible.
for the most, probably. For me, with time management, the things that have kept me from imploding the last couple of years have been, I basically try and replace the default tab in my browser. Instead of being Gmail, my email, or having that, I go to the calendar first. At the start of the day, when I reset, it's all the calendar. So I can kind of keep that intensive track of that. My Sunday afternoon, a couple hours I spend is all calendar driven. So I review the former week and all the commitments that I need to follow up on and calendar those. And I review the coming week and calendar those and try and put in some exercise time, try and put in some R&R time. And not to actually work on that Sunday, but just look at the week and what I need to accomplish. The other thing that I've just really I've flirted with for years, but I've fully leaned into this year is I've realized that I get a lot done at night. I can power through and I work hard at night. And then the problem is I stay up late and I can't go to sleep because I'm just wired because I've been at the screen. So I've put an almost hard fast rule on I get up super early, right? I'll get up at 4:30 or 5 and get a couple hours in before the kids are up and power through to a point of, basically ending work within an hour, hour or two hopefully before I'm actually going to bed. Which was hard to do because it's I'm really productive at night, but I just found that I was kind of screwing myself the next day.
I will also just add that in the last 4 months or so, we have started sleeping in separate bedrooms, which I think is like the death of our relationship. It's
like a taboo thing.
It's very taboo, but I think it's worth talking about because it actually is extraordinarily helpful.
It enabled me to start getting up super early and not bothering her, for example. Right?
Yeah.
And having kids who are on different schedules, well, they're, unfortunately for her, they're pretty much always coming to see mom, right? And that was one of the big drivers for that change was, okay, the kids come in, we're both awake, but they don't want me at all, right? So that was good for me. It wasn't as good for you.
That's true.
Didn't change anything for you though.
So scheduling wise, Google Calendars is really your main.
Yeah, to live with that.
For
In terms of
booking your
apps,
trips and doing all that, what is your favorite way to manage all that?
I don't have a great tool for it. I calendar everything. I calendar the travel time to the airport, I calendar the check-in time, I calendar the Uber ride after, I calendar sort of every bit because otherwise, and I try and fit in, calls and things in those spots. But one app that I actually do, it's not an app, it's a website, it's called Calendly. And it's a scheduling app for people to schedule with you. And you can set up all these really short URLs. So I've got calendly.com/jr/call. I send that to somebody, they can access my calendar. I have predefined spots that I will take calls in. I've got one for quick call, which is 25 minutes, long call, which is 45. I've got a meeting call, I've got a lunch one, all different parameters. And I just shoot it to them and say, pick a time, and it shows up on my calendar. So that's, I think, the best automated tool I've used. In terms of travel, it's just, I think, standardizing on airlines and paths, leading into, I know the flight schedules, for Alaska and Virgin going to San Francisco. It just makes it easy to plan. The other question was about
culture, just business culture. You're growing things, trying to deal with that.
Yeah, that's like a whole hour
I
long
thought maybe
conversation.
it was, so
Yeah,
that's fine. You can skip it.
I'd like to say I had a really quick, quippy answer for this one. I think that it's kind of like the relationship. It's just constant communication. Because the thing in startup mode is that every 3 to 6 months it's a different company, right? And there's different people and there's different processes that worked 3 months ago that don't now. And so,
was it always a group decision?
No, that was a big change for us also of getting to not be consensus on certain things, right? This VP owns that thing, and that's going to take input, but they're going to run with it. I think that culturally, if I was thinking about that, the thing that I'm focused on the most, and I know that I do better when I do, it's really, really hard, and as a company, I think we talk about a lot, especially in our exec team, is candor. It's really easy to just sort of go with it, or to not really have that hard conversation in the meeting, in the exec offsite when we're sitting there debating the point, but it's just really corrosive if we don't. I don't like conflict, but if I don't have it, it bites me in the ass later. So being direct about that stuff is sort of personal practice for me now.
I don't know.
So, you said that when you started this, you had to make it work. So it sounds like you didn't have another job. It sounds like
That's very true.
What
It's
was
very
your
scary
runway
for a while.
like? And your lovely co-partner was going to school, and you had 2 new babies.
Yes. So what was I doing basically?
Yeah. What were you
So
thinking?
I had done, I call it 1.5 startups before because one of them didn't really have a business model. even though we spent a fair amount of money, investment money. So I basically had two kind of bad startup experiences. I mean, I learned a lot, it was great, I worked with great teams, but they didn't go the way I wanted, right? And I was very sort of miffed about that. I had a couple months after the end of the second one where I was like, startups suck, I'm done. So I went back to consulting, which is what I had done for 11 years before. I had been building web applications and things for a bunch of other big companies. And that's kind of when I started working with Matt, my co-founder, the CEO. And it was classic, like one door closes, another one opens. I was at a meetup in Southeast Portland telling the story, the deck like this, of the rapid rise and fall of my previous startup. And that's where I met Matt. And we hit it off, we started having beers, chatting it up. Both of us were like kind of over startups, he'd done a bunch of startups, and we're like, we're consulting, we got kids on the way, let's take it easy, set our own hours. And that was kind of the other thing with this move into the company was we had really kind of cushy lives. Like it was like I was probably working 70% as hard as I am now, or 60% even, and doing fine, right? Doing comfortable. It's really fun to build stuff, and doing projects for others for high hourly wages is fun for a while, but it's after more than a decade of doing it, I just couldn't do it anymore. And the promise of building something and figuring out culture and figuring out how we can integrate teams and figuring this stuff out was too appealing.
How's your relationship with Matt changed or not changed?
It's like a marriage. Like, seriously, I mean, it's like, there's good times and bad times, right? You go through that.
Is he married as well?
He is, yeah.
So he has kids?
Yes.
Yeah,
So at least you guys can relate.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
Yeah, there were 5 kids under 3 was what the metric we threw out when we started the business. He had just had his third. It's good. It's evolved constantly though. It's nothing like, we hardly even talk anymore because we're sort of in different worlds and different things that we're doing. But it's kind of the same rules. It's like, it's really easy for us to not take the time to do that lunch, and we know each other really well, and we're kind of very focused on what we're doing, so we don't have to do that one-on-one, we'll push it back, but that starts to be corrosive over time as well. You just you have to spend the time, you gotta develop the rituals. I think it's one of the most interesting and complex relationships I've had outside of a family member or partner, right? It's like, there's just a lot to it, there's a lot of history, there's a lot at stake, and there's also there's a love, and there's a hate, there's all the things together, so it's an interesting relationship. And now that and there were 3 co-founders, and we sort of had to all mutually agree that he was going to leave about 2 years in. And now that there are 70 of us, and there's 7 execs, I think. It's definitely still a unique relationship. It's like the 2 founders, right? And we have that special bond, which every once in a while we'll be sitting in a meeting, and so January 4th we had 16 people start. And we just kind of looked across the room at each other and it was like, yep, didn't have to say anything. It was just this, wow, look where we are.
So we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, so. Anything else?
IV therapy, coming back to that question, what's the frequency being like? If it's once a month, maybe it's okay, but if it's once a week, I worry about you. So just curious, you don't have to share it, but.
Can you repeat the question? When
yeah, like the frequency of your using IV therapy.
Oh, I use it event-based, so when I've got a large thing, like
No, but
transatlantic
for
flight.
last year, so it's been, yeah. Just because no amount, I tried various other legal items like 5-hour energy and all those other things, but nothing beats your other recommendations like exercise and midnight sleep and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I've probably done IVs, like every couple of months, maybe?
Every other month or so.
Other month?
That's
Yeah.
not too bad, yeah.
Okay. I feel like I would like to do them more. I feel like it could benefit. I mean, I feel great after them.
Yeah.
Everything goes well. I just, they're not cheap, for one thing. And I don't like emails.
And there's a time issue.
It is time.
You have to sit there for some period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, the opposite of what you have communicated, in a chaotic type existence, which the startup is, you've put some modality of order into this entire sequence, and you seem to have your lives very nicely sequenced, regardless of the in-between conversations that you have. For those of us that are not as stable as what you wish to portray yourself as.
Oh, I don't think we're stable at all. We're nicely sequenced. We are sequenced.
How does one relate to it? I'm listening to this and saying, well, I couldn't even concentrate for more than 10 minutes without changing the subject matter, apart from the fact that I'm ADHD and dyslexic, but still I understand that well. How do you actually function at that level of, I function at a high bandwidth, mental bandwidth, and I cater for things personally, but you are operating and interacting with other people at a fairly high bandwidth and mental interaction. How are you maintaining that consistency? And it's not just that IV stuff and you've got an exceptional support system behind you. Something you've got there that I'm trying to tap into?
I mean, the two things that I've gotten the most boost out of in the last year have been increasing sleep by an hour and stopping drinking. I love alcohol. It's delicious. I like how I feel. But it takes days to fully get it out of your system. When you stop drinking it, everything feels better. I sleep better. I exercise more. I'm more patient. I get up earlier. So I think for me it was, I always start with those three things I have because I've had to sort of take things out. And
do you not feel like
I took out caffeine too.
Do you not feel that you have to shake loose?
I do, all the time, yeah.
Yeah, because so how do you contain that?
How do I contain myself
How do you contain yourself from shaking loose?
I mean, I appreciate the sentiment that I appear to not be shaking loose. But I feel like I'm shaking loose every day, right? It's hard. I mean, these are, it's like, throw these things up here, and they're part aspirational, and they're part the things that have gotten me through.
I looked at your calendar, it says the opposite. It says that you focus consistently. So how do you achieve that level of optimization? That's a simple question.
I mean, all these things, really. The other thing that you didn't touch much on, but she can go into more of the science around is we've diet-wise very gotten into, I guess what would be the best way for what we eat? How would you describe it?
Today, it's anorexia.
Well, good point. I actually did not eat before coming here because I was not expecting it.
I would say that we strongly lean towards keto and or paleo / potentially slow carb.
Which has also brain clarifying effects.
Yeah.
Eating high carbohydrate things actually.
Jared pops a lot of pills. Let's be honest.
And they're all supplements. Yeah. Nothing is a prescription. It's all.
That's true.
But I'm very intentional about when I take the things and the timing in which I take them, and I take 7 or 8 pills a day.
That's nothing.
No, and that's like the average day, right? But they're all supplemental. There's no in there. But it's B vitamins. It is fish oil. It's things like that I found that work well for me at different times.
Yeah, there's nootropics thrown in there and other things too, for sure. Yeah.
And I actually think that that's a really good way to close the session because that's exactly right. He's always on, right?
Yeah,
so how do you sustain that day after day after day, right? It's a ton of things that they talked about tonight, which I hope enlightened all of you as it did me. And so thank you so much, JR and Jessica, for sharing your story. It was really helpful. So our next Confessions is on February 28th with Sam Blackman with Elemental Technologies, and we don't have a location yet, but we'll get all that information out to you as soon as we can. So we look forward to having you all back there in a month. And then our next event is actually on February 3rd, where we do a pitch club, and we let all of our entrepreneurs practice their pitch. So you're welcome to come to that. And then we're launching programming in Eugene and Corvallis this year. So if you have contacts there, please check out our website and send them to Pitch Club and Mentor Connect down in Eugene and Corvallis. And those events are taking place on the 9th and the 13th. I also want to thank you to Torque and Tomp. Thank you so much for hosting us this evening. And then also to our platinum level sponsors, CBRE, Desk Hub, and Merger Tech. And then again, a big, huge round of applause for JR and Jessica. Please will be here for a little bit longer. If if you have additional questions, so we'll make it a wrap.
Thanks.